All right.
All right.
Here we go.
This.
So, Fireside Palaver, episode 26. This episode, 100% dedicated to book 5 of the Dark Tower series, The Wolves of Calla. We've read the whole thing. We've finished it.
We have finished.
Here's our bookmark check.
Exactly. Done.
It's done. And before we get into the detailed plot descriptions, we're going to go through the main plots of basically the last part of the book. But before we get into that, if just in case anyone out there hasn't seen our previous videos and maybe they just want to kind of hear our opinion of the book as a whole, what are your thoughts on this book as a bottle story, like this book within itself?
Oh, I love it.
You love it?
This is probably, I always am wishy-washy, but I always say this is either my favorite book or second. It's right there. I mean, I love the second book, like the Drawing of the Three, because it's such a shock to the senses after you read The Gunslinger.
Oh,
because it's completely 180 from where you're going. But this book to me is, so this is the first book that he wrote back after all of his personal stuff with the wreck and things. And like, you can tell that his storytelling juices were flowing, and like, there's so much subtle stuff in this book that's really neat. Just the reveals that happen as you go through the book, and you're just, oh my God, like, you know, that all that stuff's really good.
Yeah. I really thought it was a great book. I've been going along the Dark Tower journey. I've been along the path of the beam here with you. And there's a few times in the first couple books that I would have given up, but I kept on the path because you had the fate, but this book brought me, and there's other moments in the other books that I really like a lot, but this one, I'm in it now. I don't want to get out. I don't want it to end.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, this book kind of just hooks that, and there's so much world building in this book, even though it all takes place in this one little town. Yeah. Like, it's the expanded world around it that just opens up for you. And then, of course, I mean, we'll get to it, but like all the shocking reveals at the end of the book, and then the epilogue, you're just... Yeah, the epilogue
was great. So the thing about this book is I can hear like modern Stephen King in it. So like whenever we did the early ones, it really felt like, I don't know, there's just this dichotomy to Stephen King where there's different, he's wrote for so long and he's wrote so many books. Right. There's like eras of his writing, and the Dark Tower takes place across the entire thing, and you can really hear sort of the modern era Stephen King in this one. I would place this, so I still like Drawing of the Three as my favorite, but then this is easily my second favorite. Yeah. And there's things that I like about this book. The reason why I say I would place Drawing of the Three above this one is because I feel like you can't read this one without having read the others, whereas the Drawing of the Three is really where the Dark Tower starts. Like, I know there's the Gunslinger, but the story really starts there, and you could almost just read that as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that we have a mutual friend that recently put the Drawing of the Three on his reading. I forget the name of that social media. There's like a reading social media thing where you post that you read something and you give it a score.
Like Goodreads or something?
Goodreads,
I don't know.
Yeah. I was having a total brain fart, forgot Goodreads. I saw someone recently put the Drawing of the Three on their Goodreads, and they didn't have any of the other Dark Tower stuff. So I think they just read that book, and I think it works that way. Sure. And so I think that's the only thing, though. I think other than that, kind of edges it ahead. And the surprise, like you said, I think otherwise, I think The Wolves of Calla is like more of a Dark Tower feeling book, you know? Yes.
A lot of people, like in the like Stephen King fan groups, like on Facebook and different things like that Dark Tower is very like, it's either hit or miss. Either people just absolutely love it, or they're like, the one thing that gets me is people go, I don't like fantasy. I don't think this is necessarily it's fantasy.
It's not
elements,
fantasy,
but it's not.
Yeah,
but it's not fantasy. But a lot of people will say, "Hey,
it's
skip
dark.
the first book."
It's like a modern dark fantasy. Is like what it is. Yeah.
But there, a lot of people will say, skip the first book, go right into drawing into 3, and when you're done, go back to the Gunslinger at the beginning and read that as kind of like the last book. And it'll give you a better appreciation of of it. But like, I enjoyed the first book, so
that was one
I never understood that.
Yeah, I now I enjoyed the first book. Now that I've gotten this far, I enjoy it. I think back on it, and I'm glad that I read it. But at the time that I read it, I don't see what the hype is. I don't know.
Right.
But it really is like it's a thing that like it's bigger than the sum of its parts. Like it's after you've read more and you understand more of the world and understand more of Roland and where he was at the time of the first book, and then how this book now like harkens back and like draws that story back in. Like I was talking to Becca last night about she's trying to find a new book series to read, and the crazy thing is, I know you would like Wolves of the Calla, but I don't feel like you would be into the Gunslinger. So it's hard for me to say, yes, just start reading the series, because I think it would be a hard that would be a hard sell for her to read the Gunslinger. But if she had somehow gotten to Wolves of the Calla, I think she would like Wolves of the Calla. So it's a weird trade.
Yeah, I can definitely get that.
But yeah, I place it in the series as second, and I really liked it a lot. I don't know what.
No, I mean, it's just, and obviously as we talk about it, and then hopefully anybody that's watching, listening, has read this book as well. And if you haven't read it recently and listen to us talk about it, it'll bring back those like memories of things that have happened. Because that's like, before we did this, like, I would read something from King and there'd be like a mention, not really a mention, but like a reference to Dark Tower stuff. And I'm just, God, it's so good. And then I'll start thinking about, especially Wolves, and Wolves was such a good story. And I watched a couple videos of YouTube videos of like the King universe and connections and stuff like that. And this guy had this really intricate graph of all these stories about when they came out and how they did all this. And it was very interesting, but like kind of gives you a headache looking at it a lot too, because it's so crazy. But that's the great thing of these books.
So this book pulls in non-King universe stuff. So I mean, I guess if we're getting into the I don't want to jump way ahead, but at the same time, I don't want to like limit the conversation based on what we expect the order to go. So like, I didn't know that there would be like references to Star Wars, Marvel Comics. Harry Potter threw me for a completely loop. I had no idea any of that was going to be in any of these books. I thought it was all Stephen King reference stuff. And then I knew that, well, when they go to New York, they're going to mention Star Wars. But I didn't think the Wolves. I think in one of our episodes, I even said they have like lightsaber things, but I didn't think that they were actually going to be lightsabers.
and you know what's crazy is like they literally say Sneeches. He's literally.
I've never watched Sneeches. I've never watched or read Harry Potter. I'm like completely out of the Harry Potter loop, so I didn't know. Now I have some reference to a fandom. Now whenever I see the Sneeches thing, I'll be, oh, that's from Dark Tower.
Exactly. Way to go, J.K. Rowling. Copying Stephen King now, are you?
Yeah, when I was a kid, you had to kind of pick a side, because the Lord of the Rings movies were coming out, and there was an overlap with the Harry Potter movies, and you felt like you had to pick a team. So I didn't do any of the Harry Potter stuff. Now all my family members did both, and I cut this. I was too cool. I had to cut this one section of my life. You know. All right, so well, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, there's with those references too. It just shows you like. So whoever did all this, whoever the people are that created the Wolves and create all this, they obviously
from the year 1999
to 77, which was Star Wars, when like Harry Potter came out in what, like 99-ish, somewhere around in there, maybe.
Yeah, I think all of this somehow had a reference to 1999. Well, and then the Star Wars and the Doctor Doom thing could be from any time period, like after the 60s.
Eddie mentions previously to Jake about Star Wars, like earlier, and Jake was like, "Yeah, it was getting ready to come out when I was taken from this world." So Eddie had seen Star Wars, and then Doctor Doom's first appearance was,
oh God, I don't know, but it would have been probably is he in the first Fantastic Four?
Is he first Fantastic Four?
Let's see, first appearance.
Well, I mean, Doctor Doom may not be first appearance, but his, my mind's gone. What's his real name?
He's in 5. He's in Fantastic Four number 5, 1962.
62. So yeah, I mean, like, Susanna may know who Doctor Doom is. You know, not that she may have been in the comics, but so here's a in my book. See that?
Yes. I saw this. I saw the. I looked after we read the book. I looked up the images from your book, the illustrated ones. Yeah, because I wanted to see how much like Doctor Doom they looked.
But so as far as the book itself, though, or at least this last part, you've got several different things all coming together. You got Susanna and the chap and Mia. And then you've got Eddie, Callahan, and Roland having to go to New York to fix the Calvin Tower situation and the lot situation. And then you've got Jake going off to investigate what's happening with Slightman. So that's kind of like the main things, and they all kind of come to a head at the end. They all come together.
Yeah. What's crazy is, so looking at our show notes here, there's the most notes are for confronting the wolves. But when I was reading it, I really felt like the wolf confrontation.
Oh, it was short.
It's just like one chapter. It's really quick. Really, it's all about all this other stuff. It's
all about the build up to the wolves finally getting there. Yeah. And then even Roland says in the book, the battle's usually 5 minutes, and then it's done.
Yep.
And you're either in that 5 minutes, you're either going to stand and be true, or you're going to fall. And that's kind of how the book was. It was like literally build up to it. The wolves show up, they take them down, and then it's over. And then it's dealing with the aftermath.
How did you feel about, so they have the, Roland says, and then he says there'll be 5 minutes of the senseless killing or whatever he says. I can't remember what he says, but then the sickness comes, and then after they confront the wolves and that comes to a conclusion, then he describes the sickness, which is his feeling of like despair and like uselessness. He says, like he feels like he just is. I don't know. I got the impression that he felt like it's like a form of guilt. Like, I'm just useful to these people because I'm good at killing, you know?
Killing, yes.
And this is what they look at me as this great knight and figure in their lore, but really he almost sounded like he wished in some other life, like he wished he could be something else, you know?
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting, I kind of want to go back and read that a little bit closer. Because I thought,
I mean, I think he definitely, killing is what he's really, really good at.
Yeah.
I mean, that is like, but at the same time, I don't necessarily think that he feels guilty about killing the wolves. I think killing the wolves is no issue. I think the guilt, or not necessarily guilt, but the despair, down, whatever afterwards comes from like, I think he sees himself as only being useful in that situation.
Yeah.
And now the situation is done.
Yeah.
What does he have more to do? Because he thinks of himself, and not just this book, but in all previous books, he always references himself as being a little dim-witted and not very smart and things like that. And that he would say, oh,
but he's
Elaine or Cuthbert, they were good. They were the good ones. I was, the fighter. And so when the fighting's done, he's done. But over and over through all these books, he's proved that he is like,
he's extremely intuitive.
Hella intuitive, and resourceful, smart, and all this stuff. Yeah. And he just doesn't see himself that way. And I think that's part of what it is he's got that just usefulness feeling.
This book also has more of him and Jake, and this book kind of establishes that like father figure to Jake kind of symbolism. And on the one hand, maybe he doesn't realize how much of an influence he's having on Jake and Eddie, and especially Jake. But on the other hand, maybe he does realize it, and he wishes that he could have maybe had that life instead of this one. There's a lot of moments at the beginning of this book where, and it deals into the Jake and Ben Slightman, even very early on, whenever like Jake is like getting to be a kid, he's like getting to play with this other kid, Benny, and Roland kind of lets him not have to be a gunslinger for a while. But Roland also kind of has this internal monologue about that. And I think that is this same part of Roland here, that where he's saying a gunslinger never lets his guard down. He always pays attention, but a gunslinger doesn't like jump out of the barn into the hay bales. Yeah.
What's really interesting with Jake on that side is he is definitely, he's taken to being a kid again, but at the same time, he's always thinking in the background like a gunslinger.
Yeah.
And that's how he notices all the stuff that's happening at the farm, because he didn't completely shut off. And I think it's what's weird with this whole series is sometimes with the time frame, you always wonder, how did Susanna and Eddie and Jake get so good at doing certain things in the time? But like in reality, this up to this point, this has probably been, I don't know, a years.
I don't know. It's hard to say because
since Drawing of the Three and since they all got together, and he also makes it known that like with Drawing of the Three, those Eddie and Susanna were drawn for a purpose, and Jake was brought back for a purpose. And you kind of have that license as a reader to disregard those facts and know that they were chosen for a reason. And it's kind of like they were bestowed superpowers almost, like when they came to Midway. They don't have superpowers, but the shooting and like with Susanna and the plates, like she's automatically just the best one, like after like a couple days.
I think that Roland knows these things, and because they're quartet, they probably don't even know that they're absorbing these things from him.
Yes.
Is the way I kind of imagine it.
And so when they were drawn, these powers of, I don't want to say powers because not powers, but like this, I don't know a good word for it, but like their acumen for being gunslingers just whereas it might take a normal person like as a kid their whole entire lifetime, like with Roland going through court and all that.
Yeah,
they've essentially been bestowed all that.
They got the fast track it because
they got the fast track, and now they're on it. And there's definitely things in this series that you kind of have to like. It's the same thing in other series, but you have to kind of like overlook and be like, okay, we'll just take that as the way things are.
Another topic that I meant to bring up in our previous episodes that's kind of like dealing with the first sections of the book and not necessarily this last section is the trust that the trust that Roland has in displays in Eddie and Jake. Now, for obvious reason, he doesn't really display it as much in Susanna because he knows about Susanna's chap. But early on, whenever Jake goes to Roland and says, there's something fishy going on here at this Slightman residence, he doesn't say, explain to me everything and I'll tell you what to do. He just he just trusts that Jake knows what he's doing. He's a gunslinger now. He'll have complete. He'll know what to do. And then
Eddie's always like, hey, maybe we should go out there to whatever. And Jake and Roland's just, no, this is Jake's part of the adventure. Yeah.
Eddie's the helicopter parent.
Yes.
And then with Eddie, one of my favorite moments of this sort of trust example is whenever they're giving the speech at the town hall kind of place about, okay, we're gunslingers. Here's what we're going to do to help you fight the wolves, whatever. And they're trying to win the town over. He just like says, okay, Eddie, give him the speech.
Give him the speech.
And Eddie's up there like, well, what the hell am I supposed to say? But then sure enough, he starts talking and he can do it. And I think that Roland, he just knew that Eddie would be all right in that moment. This is a moment for him. There's a lot of little moments like that in this.
There's in the part where Roland asks Eddie to go pick those berries from outside of Callahan's, and that's when he wants to tell Eddie what he knows about Susanna. Yeah. And then and Roland's the whole time thinking he's gonna freak out, what's gonna happen, all this stuff, and then he tells him, and Eddie's just, well, you're my den, so I trust your judgment. And Roland's just, that's not at all what I was expecting. And it shows how much he's grown, but also the trust that Eddie has in Roland, despite a lot of the crap that Roland has pulled on them in the past.
Yeah.
And I think that with Eddie finally seeing the rose in person, it even talks about in the book when he first sees it, and he's like, nothing else matters anymore. This is everything has completely changed for me, and there's nothing more important than the rose. And and he sees that too with Susanna, because he even mentions, I would still give up her for the rose type thing. He's on the fence about it.
But at the end of the book, I wouldn't say he displayed that.
But yeah, I know at the end of the book, definitely changed.
I think that's an interesting, I didn't think about that. I think that's an interesting observation, but I think, I don't think so. I think whenever it really came down to it, he was choosing Susanna over the rose, at least in that moment. But also it's, oh man, this is a huge topic. You just struck a huge topic there. So it's like whenever Roland sees the pink orb for the first time, and it shows him the tower and the fate of everything, how it all hinges on the tower, and then he completely takes up his bed and starts pursuing the dark tower in spite of what's going on with Susanna or Susan. And
he lets her burn it. Well, he didn't let her, but
he didn't let her.
He's just okay.
Yeah, it was like he didn't. I don't know that he knew that in particular was going to happen, but
no, I don't think so either.
But he said, okay, this journey is more important, and we need to pursue this. We'll save her if we can, but this is more important. You know what I mean? Right. And I think essentially we saw that Eddie was in the same situation and chose Susanna over the tower. Yeah. So that's just an interesting observation.
Yeah. And, we talked a little bit last time about how aware she is of being pregnant. And so once they all come together and have their palaver, and she comes, at the end, she's, by the way, I'm maybe with child. She what's weird is, and I don't know if you've picked up on it too, and there's more to it coming, but if you look at Susanna, she doesn't look pregnant. Like, they even says her stomach's still pretty flat, other than her boobs got a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And she acts like she's sick sometimes or has gas, and then she still has her period monthly. So, like, with Mia and her, like, Mia is mother, Susanna is pregnant with this chap. Like, Mia, this other personality, is kind of like the mother goose type personality, I guess. But she realizes that she's not gonna. I think she realizes that she's gonna lose control at some point, and it's coming. And so then you get, when the wolves thing starts happening, she starts having those pains. Like, she finally confronts Mia.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. And she's, hey, we gotta defeat these wolves, and I have to be here for that. So if you'll just hold off the birth, he's like, if you let me fight and we defeat them, then I will do whatever you want us to do, whatever you think is best to have the baby. And again, that's so, like, one of the big themes kind of going along this book is they're keeping secrets from each other. Like, Roland's not telling them about Susanna at first. Susanna's not telling them what she may think. Jake's not telling them about the Slightmans, and then Eddie's just Eddie. And then they all come together and they have this discussion, and kind of everything comes out. I don't think Jake tells them anything at that point, but Susanna finally comes out, and then literally not too much further into the book, she makes a secret agreement with Mia, and here come all the secrets and lies and things again.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting, like, she knows that it's not her child. You know what I'm saying? It's not, she's not pregnant. She's pregnant, but she's not pregnant with her child. And she is willing to break the quartet, potentially, just to ensure that everyone else is safe and she can fight, and then consequences be damned after that, because once that's happened, then everything's supposed to be hunky-dory, I guess, in the Calla. And
she makes that agreement, like, literally in the trench, in the moment.
Yes, in the moment.
There's not really much of an alternative in that moment, other than just having the baby, but then you're going to screw up Roland's plans. I mean, I don't know.
I think at some point, like, and again, it's the whole thing too with it being, even though if it's split personalities, it's still her. Like, so she could say, I'm going to make a deal with Mia, and then I can just turn around and tell Roland, hey, this is coming. I just made a deal with Mia.
Right. Yeah. She chose not to tell Roland,
but she
after
chose not
the dust settled.
But I think that is partially because you think of them as separate, but they're one person. Like,
I really didn't think about that. Yeah. I see what you're saying. I kind of thought of it as, well, that was all Mia at that point. As a matter of fact, in the book, they start calling her Mia instead of Susanna.
Well, Roland calls her Mia when they go back that one time.
Yeah, but what I mean is Stephen King calls her Mia. So
definitely.
Basically after the battle, the characters may call her Susanna, but the narrative of the book calls her Mia.
Mia. Yes.
So is Susanna in control at all, or was that all just
not anymore?
Mia. Yeah.
I think Mia could have done this at any point.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mia's fear is that they would have realized that that wasn't Susanna.
Yeah.
And so she just kind of sat in the background and made sure everything was going smoothly until it was time. And then she just kind of what Detta did is just basically push Susanna completely away.
Yeah.
And now it's just Mia. And who knows what happened to Susanna.
So, speaking of Detta, there's one moment during the Wolves shootout that Susanna shouts something I can't remember, but she uses the "muffaz" term. Yeah. I think that's Detta shouting instead of
exactly.
I think that.
Well, moment... sometimes they make Eddie and Roland will make that kind of thing. Oh, that definitely was Detta coming out there, or whatever. Some other interesting things with Susanna. So when Roland and Callahan have their discussion, there's lots of things that come out right there. Number one, and just for anybody out there, whatever side of this you land on, whatever, but Roland asks if Rosalita would be willing, or if she would be able to perform an abortion on Susanna. And Callahan, being a former, I guess, Catholic priest, that was just like, but it's, well, you say Roland's thing is it's not a baby, it's a demon.
A demon baby.
It's a demon. So you're not aborting a baby. Like that's literally a demon, and it's probably going to come out of Susanna and eat her or something, like, But Callahan's stance is, it doesn't matter. It's life, I guess. I mean, he never really comes out and says that, but like, I'm assuming it's life, and the Catholic faith, is completely against it. But then again, you go back and be like, but it's a demon. Like, I mean, I thought, I'm not Catholic, so I can't understand like that deep rooted, kind of I guess faith type thing.
I don't feel
like the fact that he was so against it, as angry against it, like literally to the point where if you ever mention this again, we will have nothing to do with each other ever again. So that was a little bit over the top.
I like this conversation, but I don't find it. I don't want to say I don't find it believable, because I also sympathize with what you said. I'm not Catholic. I don't know. Maybe there really is. But most of the people that I know that are pro-life would still be willing to kill a demon baby.
Right. I mean,
I feel like Callahan would have changed his mind in this scenario. He would have been okay with it if it meant the fate of the wolves taking all the kids, and because essentially what you're saying is, I'm willing to risk 50% of the children in the Calla for this one baby that we may not even both consider to be a baby, which that is the abortion debate in itself right there.
Roland even says, not only like do the children of the Calla, it's the fate of the entire universe.
Yeah, like, right.
Literally,
I don't know if something Callahan happens to, like, does Callahan have that perspective though? I don't know. Maybe he does.
Well, I mean, he knows that he hasn't really talked Tower. He knows Tower, but I mean, he's traveled all these different worlds, and he has to know, that all this stuff is somehow linked together. I don't know that necessarily he knows that if they lose to the wolves, that whole universes are all going to spin out of control. But he's got to realize that there's only 4 of them, plus the ladies that are going to be throwing the plates. I don't know I can't remember at that point they've discussed the plates yet. So Callahan may not know about it at that point. But even if he hasn't, that's 4 people, 3 guns, and you're expecting them to defeat these wolves. And then if she goes into labor, which it could be like in 5 minutes, it could be 5 days or months.
Like, who knows?
Who knows? But it's coming. And like, if it happens before, then we're doomed. Because, I mean, Susanna, to me, when you look at the quartet, like, Roland is obviously the best. Mm-hmm. Susanna is second. Like, she, as far as shooting, fighting, all that stuff, Susanna's second.
I think that if you split Roland into two people, they'd be Eddie and Susanna. Because
exactly.
Because Eddie has that intuition and sort of the street smart. I know Roland doesn't necessarily have street smarts, but he's the intuitive side and she's sort of the skill side. Yes. But another thing that I think is special about this conversation is, and I think is Stephen King writing himself into this conversation, which I absolutely love. I don't mind when authors do that. We said the same thing about Brandon Sanderson and the religious influences. I actually love that in those books, especially The Way of Kings. So the conversation is two men talking about the fate of this woman. And it's like it's a conversation about abortion. So it's like, that's obviously like intentional. Yes. And then Roland makes some comment.
He's never even mentioned it to Susanna yet.
Yeah,
he's talking to Callahan about giving her an abortion without even consulting her first.
Callahan kind of takes all the heat for this conversation, but really, Roland did. He just made on his own accord, went and started talking about this. But then also,
I mean, what happens? What happens if Callahan? All right, we can go check it out and see. What's Roland do? Does he go to Susanna and go, guess what? I talked to Callahan. He talked to Rosalita. We're just going to go ahead. You don't know it yet, but we know you're pregnant. And we're just going to go ahead and take care of that for you. Yeah. No, that conversation seems like it may, or it probably, even if she was okay with it, she probably wouldn't have liked that it went that way. No.
And then the other aspect of this conversation, Roland points out that he called her Susanna up until the point that they started talking about abortion, and then she became the woman instead of, calling her by name. And then the last line from this conversation that I liked was, he says something about your man Jesus didn't seem to like women much. But then there's also the comment about, he says, was he ever married? And then he says, no, but his girlfriend was a whore. Yeah. That was a hilarious conversation, but I appreciated that being in the book, but I don't think that anybody would be unwilling to abort a demon baby.
Exactly. Like, but to keep the story moving, they decide that that's not going to be a thing. Now, I mean, I think Roland says, well, what if she comes and says, I want this? I think he mentions that, and I think even Callahan even then says it's still, I won't be a part of it, and nobody that we know is going to be a part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was quite the whole section there, and it is really cool, like you said, that like Stephen King is definitely known for his views on all kinds of things, politics and religion and all this stuff. And that's definitely, I think, one of those things where he came through in that part of that book.
I think the political conversation to be had there is they don't both agree on whether it's a baby or not. Like, to Roland, this is not a human baby. This is not a child. There's no potential for this to be a child. And so therefore it's not killing a baby because it's not. And then to Callahan, which I think is, I think that I understand the conversation he's trying to have, but I don't really know. I guess my point is that I don't know that it's really played out well, because I don't think that most people would be opposed to killing a demon baby. But just for the sake of the conversation, Callahan's perspective is, we don't know if it's a demon baby. As far as we know, it could be a real baby, and at any potential, then it's murder. Right. So he's against it.
And all life is sacred. So
So I think I don't know. I appreciate that it's in the book.
Yeah. I think it's a good,
yeah.
You know, like I said,
not
like
quite,
a good back and forth between them two.
It's not quite the Seinfeld, when is a pizza? It's the same it's the same kind of conversation.
But yeah, so but it also with Susanna, like we mentioned before, she picks up the plate, which we talked about Gray Dick and all that stuff in the last thing. And so she finally picks it up and trains, and she's really good.
Yeah.
And again, I think we talked about this last time, where the one thing I have to wrap my mind around is like they're talking about throwing these plates 60 yards and splitting. I
can't decide if the plates are spinning or if, because they have the holes drilled in them, they're going straight.
I'm pretty sure they're spinning.
If they're spinning,
I think it's
part of it's flat.
So my perspective, because I play disc golf, is obviously the weight is going to be different because these are like plates and probably a little bit more streamlined. But like when I throw a disc, that disc swerves and then always finishes off.
Yeah.
If you're right-handed, it's going to finish off to the left. If you're left-handed, it's going to finish off to the right. And that's all I can get my head wrapped around is like, I'm thinking, man, I'm throwing these discs and they're all over the place, and like wind, even slight wind can affect it. And these, they're basically throwing over, at least in the practice, they're throwing further than if you picture a football field, they're 10 yards on the other side of midfield, throwing a plate and hitting, like if you were standing on the 50-yard line and then stuck a small potato on top of the goalpost. Yeah. They're hitting those things regularly.
Yeah.
It's just, again, but it's one of those things that you just have to accept. Exactly. But she's really good at that. And they also mentioned that they may want to train Jake on him a little bit, but they
never really did that. Yeah.
They never really got around to that. But so yeah, that's basically with Susanna, is as far as what she's been doing, and we'll get to the end and what happens later. But yeah, that's kind of her thing, is waiting on pregnancy. Her and Mia are kind of, until the end, I don't think they really acknowledge each other. And yeah, she's ready to fight with plates now instead of. So if we jump to Eddie, New York, and Tower.
Yeah. So
I loved this part is great.
Yeah.
When Eddie shows up and like they give the description of Eddie, like what Tower sees is this guy with like a ponytail and this threadbare clothing, and I don't know. I picture like
it's
like a Jason Momoa type guy, like with the ponytail and like weird clothes and stuff.
It's like what Eddie saw the first time he saw Roland. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like this otherworldly. Now Eddie is in those shoes,
Yes.
And Tower is in Eddie's shoes, where he's the fish out of water. This whole storyline of Eddie in New York and Tower and Andolini and like this for me.
This is one of my favorite things.
Yeah, me too. I really like the Jake and Jake following around Andy, which I know that's the next plot we're going to talk about. But like, I would say these two were more important to me in this last section than confronting the wolves. At this point, I had kind of figured out that, okay, the wolves must just be like one chapter, or it's going to be a cliffhanger, because there's no way they can. Right. I was just, all right, this is what the rest of the book is. This is the most important part right here.
You get to that point in the book, and you go, man, there's not that many pages left. I haven't even fought the wolves yet.
Yeah.
What's going on here? But no, this is, so, again, not spoiler, but like this part of the book is what's going to carry forward into the other. But this is the story. Like the wolves are just a cool thing, and kind of gives you like an idea of again, some world building stuff and things like that. But the focal point of the Dark Tower is what Eddie going to New York and being with Tower and all that. That is the crux of everything.
I had an epiphany. I wish I could remember it now. Because I've been watching different reviews, and some of them said that, okay, the story of the Calla is kind of like a side quest, is what people called it. And
basically, yeah.
It was unnecessary, and the other plot was good. But I remember thinking, oh, this is why they had to have that. And I can't remember now. Maybe I'll remember it by the time we get to the confrontation, maybe. But
I think one of the reasons they had to have the wolves, or not necessarily the wolves, but like this, what happened there. Because, I mean, yeah, you literally could have had this book, not called it The Wolves of the Calla, and it just been all about Eddie.
Yeah. They could have ran into Callahan
Tower. They could have ran into Callahan and
basically the whole thing could have happened without the wolves. Yeah. But I thought of a reason they had to have it. I hope that I remember before we get to the confrontation. Maybe I won't though.
But so like during their palaver, Eddie brings up, hey, you need to go to New York. I mean, this has to be done. We have, number one, they have to find out what the date is, because they know that they have to meet, what is it, July 15th, I think, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. I think it's July.
Yeah. They have to do something with that lot by then. And 19th. they know that time is going faster over there than it is where they are.
Yeah.
And they also know that whatever day they go to over there is, they can't go back further. So if they miss that July date, they can't go back in time to before it. It'll just pass.
Right.
So Eddie, I think more than anybody of the quartet, Eddie understands how important New York is. And I think Roland understands it. I don't think Susanna really thinks about it at all. And I don't think Jake thinks about it. I think Jake thinks about New York as be cool to go to New York or whatever. But Susanna's busy internally with the whole chat thing and Mia and all this other stuff. Roland's kind of got the big picture of everything. So this, like I said, Jake's is the Slightmans, Eddie's is New York. And so he realized he's got to, we have got to get over there. And they have Black 13, which, through stories, through Callahan's story, they understand that you open the box with Black 13, it'll crack the door open.
Right.
And they can step through. You just have to kind of like, again, going back to Wizard of Oz, there's no place like home. You think of where you want to be, you get that in your mind, open the door and you step through, and that's where you are. So he comes and says, hey, I'm going to go to New York. It needs to be me. And another cool thing is, with Eddie's past, when this comes up this time, there's no question from Roland about whether or not he should let Eddie.
Is he just going to score and
like going to score or do whatever? It is, it shows you how much Eddie's, again, he's focused on that rose. And so that's what they do. They go up there and open the thing and stick the bullets in their ears, and Eddie goes through the door. The doorway cave, or the cave of voices, that's a kind of freaky place too. Like, you walk into this cave and all your worst thoughts of
your deepest
everything come out in the voices of those people. Like,
I know.
You can see why they avoided that cave up until the time the doorway showed
I know.
up.
It's crazy that that's not an aspect of the doorway. That's just that cave already did that.
Right. And they go over there. He goes over there, and so there's a couple things that happen here. One is that book, The Dogan, which is written by Benjamin Slightman Jr. and here's another coincidence with books. You've got the Charlie Choo Choo thing, and you've got Wizard of Oz, you got all these book things, and then you got the Wayne D. Overhoser book about, and now you got another person from the Calla who's written a book. Oh
yeah. So, yeah. And it's tied to father and son too, because there was this whole thing about how it was published wrong, which is why. So the aspect,
one says the Hogan, says the Dogan.
Yeah. The aspect of Tower's story that I could most relate to is this pursuit for like first editions and this whole collectible thing. Because it's just like a comic book collector, you know what I mean?
Oh, definitely.
If I were in his situation and I had a comic book store and I had one case that had all my wall books, I had my wall books, it would definitely cross my mind. Maybe I wouldn't die for it, but if there's the opportunity, I would be, Eddie, let's just take all these down off the wall and just carry these through the door with you. Like, I completely relate to that side of Tower.
Right.
And I like how Eddie I like how Eddie doesn't understand it. And he keeps talking about how, I know it's in this section, but, whenever he goes to the post office in Maine, it's because the asshole was buying some book. He's got some seller on the hook.
We left it for you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing is like when Eddie gets there, Andolini and I forgot which the other dude
were there. Remember his name, the henchman.
And basically Andolini's saying, you're going to do this or we're going to burn your books.
Yeah.
And like that more than anything was what kind of set him off. If Eddie wouldn't have showed up at that point, there's no telling what would have happened.
He might have just been willing to give up.
He might would have just done it. So Eddie comes in and you at the right time and saves the day and basically throws Andolini for a loop. Not only because some random dude just showed up, but some random dude just showed up and seems to know intimate details about everything.
Yeah.
And like, and he's just dumbfounded. And he's just, I'll go to Balazar and I'll tell him this, but it's not going to do anything. And I think Eddie realizes it too. He knows that this is just a time stalling thing.
Yeah.
Because he even says, once they leave, he's like, we got to go. You got to leave. They're coming back. Like,
based on traffic is what he said.
Based on traffic, it'll be how long he gets there, tells him, and then they come back.
Yeah. I thought that part was pretty intense.
Yes.
So before we move too far from this moment, there's kind of a counter. Stephen King writes what I think is kind of a counter argument to his pro-life versus pro-choice conversation with Callahan earlier in the book, because Eddie threatens to kill the wives and children and everything of these henchmen.
Right.
And then there's a conversation about, I'm pretty sure it's in this, somewhere in this scene with Tower, not later on with Callahan, but I'm pretty sure it's with Tower, where he says something about, would you really do that? And Eddie says, what do you think the offspring, people like that are wolves? And what do you think the offspring of people like that are? They don't have babies. They have other wolves. They raise other wolves. Right. And I think that this is an argument in Callahan's column of, well, you can't predetermine that like Andolini's kids are going to be the same thing he is.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's why it would be wrong for Eddie to go kill Andolini's kids.
Well, I think both of them actually said, I think Tower says something about that. And then when
Callahan definitely brings it up. Yeah. Cause Callahan
and then when Callahan hears it, he asks the same thing. Would you really kill him? Both Tower and Callahan are both, would you really kill him?
But I think the thing about, wolves raise more wolves is in the conversation with Tower. But to Callahan, he says like, hey, why don't like, you're gonna like let's just not go down this road. Let's just pretend like I said that I was just bluffing.
Yeah, which is very cool.
Yeah. Like, but I thought it was interesting to point out that like that Stephen King wrote the yin and the yang to that conversation.
Right. So basically what Eddie's plan is, hey, we want you to sell us the tower or the lot.
Yeah.
And for $1. And later you'll reap the rewards of this. And if you do this, it's basically like you've been waiting for someone to come in. You've been waiting for the savior. We're here.
Mm-hmm.
And you've sold off all this other property. This like you were saying before, this bookstore is in the middle of Manhattan,
mm-hmm.
probably in prime real estate.
Yeah.
I think even Andolini and all them mentioned it too. Is like you're not making money.
Mm-hmm.
This is a money pit essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be running out of your money. Yeah. And I think Eddie's, hey, if you do this, you'll get enough money. You're going to be able to do whatever you want to. You'll be able to buy as many books. You'll keep the store open, all this stuff, giving all the flowery stuff. And but he also gives a warning as far as if you don't do this, if you don't sell to us, they are going to force this now. Like, mm-hmm. I came here and showed up. So therefore, all the niceties and this July date, they're going to just peacefully come in and you're peacefully going to sign something. He's like, that's out the window now. This is blood. Like, mm-hmm. when they come back this time, they're going to hurt you or they're going to kill you. And they're going to wind up taking it anyway. So your best option is with me and giving us that lot so that they can't hold anything over your head anymore.
Yeah.
And Tower he's kind of douchey. I mean, really, like he's,
yeah, like
in this moment, he knows the danger.
Yeah.
But then you get to later and it's like in the moment, he knows the stuff, but when he's away from it, it's way in the back of his mind. It's not a big thing. And before all this, when he initially signed this thing, it was probably the same thing. He was, oh yeah, whatever, I'll do this, and it's not going to be a big deal. We'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
And then he realizes the kind of people he got into bed with, and so Eddie's that he wants to get rid of this. And then the really cool thing about this thing is the will or the letter or whatever you would call it that was left. And he basically Towers, I'll consider this if you can tell me the name that's written on this piece of paper that's in this envelope from Stephen
Torrens. Stephen
Will. And Eddie's immediate, well, it's either Stephen Deshane or Roland Deshane, and like Towers, oh my God, how do you know this?
So
and
that was a cool moment, but how did he know that it would be part of the line of Eld? How did he know that it would be either Roland or Roland's father?
I mean, it's Ka.
Because
that's the easy version. It's Ka.
Because he knew that it was a name. He says, if you can tell him what name is on this paper. And I think that Eddie could safely assume that it's either one of the Quartet or Callahan, or arguably he's also part of the Quartet now.
Well, I think they would have. I think he knows it's Roland or Stephen just because they're the two big.
They're still of the line of Eld or whatever.
They're still the line, and speaking of the line of Eld too.
Yeah.
They make mention in this book that, and when they introduce themselves to the town, they all say, Eddie Dean of New York from the line of Eld, and I'm Susanna of New York from the line of Eld. And like at the first couple times I've read this, I always just thought of that as them standing up there and saying kind of like the same thing that Roland said. I'm Roland of Gilead, the line of Eld, whatever.
Yeah.
And but I actually think there's deeper meaning to them saying that they're of the Eld. And it kind of harkens back to how Susanna and how all of them are good shooting and good, because maybe they were drawn because they really are from the line of Eld in some way. Because like, when they talk about Roland's father, Stephen, like he was born from a hooker that that Arthur had slept with. And so like, if he slept with one hooker and had kids, he's had plenty of Jillies, and he's probably had a lot of bastard children. Yeah. And a lot of those children have procreated and over the generations and stuff. So I can see how all of them came down from some sort of like Roland in some way, a bloodline from some distant relative. They all came, and that's why they were drawn in the first place, because they are concept. From the actual line of Eld. I thought that this is the first time that it kind of made me think of that.
But also in that scene, so does in the scene later on in the book, whenever Jake remembers back to that moment, and he says that he said he was from the quartet of 99.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember him saying 19, and I didn't go back and check.
He says 99.
He does say 99.
He does say 99 because like.
But what did 99 mean at that time? Because they were all talking about 19.
Yes. So you'll find more out, but it's same thing. Like it's.
I thought, whenever he's on this side of the river or whatever, he thinks he 99 is the number that means everything. But on the Calla side, 19 is the number that means everything. And he was just mistakenly remembering that he had said 99, but really he had said 19.
During that scene, he says 99, and Eddie's like, because there's a part where Eddie's like, 99, what is that?
Oh, really?
And and I think even Jake says, I don't know, it just came to me at the moment.
Oh, weird. I thought when I read that, I thought he said 19. I read 19, even though
there's more to it. There's definitely more to. Obviously, there's going to be more to 19 and 99 and whatever. So,
but anyway, sorry.
Yeah, but there's definitely more to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
interesting.
Like, so Tower's family, what you realize is their real name's Torin, which is, I think, Dutch for tower is what they said. And then Eddie said, like, yeah, Dutch heel and the Dutch and all this stuff. And
wow,
that whole section was, but going back to maybe the time of Arthur Eld, his family has been the keeper of the rose, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And it's passed down from generation and generation and generation, no telling how long, in that lot. And like Eddie mentions, you had all kinds of property. You sold all this property, but the one you haven't is this one. There's a reason for that. And so now Tower's gone from this random bookstore owner guy in one book, and now he's like this pivotal key of saving the universes. And again, the guy's a douche. So like he knows, like, and I think they make reference to it a few times. I think deep down he knows the right thing and what he needs to do, but he can't separate his personality, I guess, from that. And so, like I said, in that moment when he's being threatened and Eddie's saving him, he's like, oh, sure. Even with the name being mentioned, like that just throws him for a loop. But as soon as everything's taken care of, that goes back. His personality comes out. He's leaving forwarding addresses. He's trying to sell and find books. Yeah. He's basically putting up this big flag saying, here I am, like, come find me.
Eddie says it's not real to him. Like he's not and I think it's more of he must know. Like he'd have to be completely dumb to not know. I think he's just separating. He doesn't want it to be real to him. He's separating himself from it.
His love for books overshadows what reality is, and essentially.
His love for books is probably a distraction,
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But so they basically make a plan, a deal that they will get the lot, but he needs Tower to find like some vacation, somewhere to go to hide out, and leave the zip code on the sign outside of the lot, and they would find it and they would figure out where he is and find him and come again.
I was thinking about like, I guess they knew it was possible because I know Eddie says, put it on the back side of the lot, not on the front. If he dresses a certain way, make sure he dresses differently that day. If the sun is out, wear glasses. He does everything he can to try to obfuscate it. But I just think no matter what you do, if Andolini, if that whole crew is like really looking out for Tower and they want this lot in particular, they've got to walk around and see that. And 5 digits I think it would be pretty easy to figure out that it's a zip code,
Well, and even if like, so Eddie's thing is, well, just get Deepno to do it. And then that way, if you're being followed or whatever, it won't, whatever. But like, I would think that
they probably know.
They know. Yeah. I was gonna say they know enough.
Yeah.
That Deepno is like his really good friend, that you would think that they would kind of have their eye on him too, but maybe not. But Ka, obviously.
I mean, I don't know what the alternative would be. No matter what they do, there's a really good chance that he'd be being, tailed.
Right.
So,
he does it though. He leaves the thing, and then, so Callahan goes back to New York, and I like Callahan going back because they asked him, would you be willing to go back to your world? And he's like, would I? Oh my God. And he goes over there and he samples like different things. That was really cool. But going back before, when the whole thing with Eddie and Tower is kind of settled, Tower's like, hey, take these books. I know you've been looking over your shoulder and something's shimmering, and I'm guessing there's some kind of doorway or something. Which is how he jumped to that conclusion.
Yeah, he's so willing to believe that.
Right.
But not that these mobsters are going to burn down his store if he doesn't.
Exactly. Please I got a bunch of like really cool books. He's like, take these. So he does, like they get this cart and they wheel it through, and Roland helps him get through it. And Roland sees a book and he looks at it. He takes off the thing and he examines it very closely and kind of, I think it says he leafs through it a little bit. And he puts it back in the bookshelf thing backwards so that you can't see the spine. So you're only looking at the pages, and he puts it back there and doesn't mention anything. He doesn't say what it is. You have no clue. You just know he looks at a book.
He recognizes names in it, and I think
he recognizes some things.
He does say that there's like an old church on the front, and I was thinking whenever I read this part for the first time before having gotten all the way to the end, I was thinking it's either going to be Salem's Lot or are there versions of the Gunslinger that have a church on the front? Because I thought it could be the Gunslinger. He opens up and reads Court's name and reads Roland Deschain.
Right.
I have a. I know it's a tower, of course. I was gonna say I think I've got a copy that's got a church on it, but no, of course. I mean the book's the Dark Tower. Of course, it's got a Dark Tower.
I've got a copy of Salem's Lot, but it's got vampire eyes on the front of it, I think, or teeth or something like that.
I don't have Salem's Lot. This book's got illustrations in it. Sorry.
But this is like, so essentially Callahan goes back. He finds the zip code. He goes to like the New York Library, looks it up, finds out where it is. He comes back, and then I can't remember if he doesn't go back again right away, but I mean, he eventually goes back to find like this little place that's in Maine. I can't remember the name of it. It's on the lake, and they've rented like a little thing, like house. So Callahan goes to this place. And what was interesting about that is he finds like the guidebook thing, and the picture of the city hall or something like that in that town is the same building as the Calla's meeting hall.
Yeah.
And so there's another big thing that comes up. And so he goes to the post office, and because Eddie's just go to the post office and ask if there's a forwarding address, and he's like, there's not going to be a forwarding address. Of course, there's a forwarding address.
But see, I think Eddie had the intuition because this guy's probably trying to get a book delivered or something.
Yes, he understands more than anybody what kind of person Tower is.
Yeah.
And then he goes and I mean they're just living life normally, like nothing's going on, and Callahan, once they try to remember what all he does, he confronts.
He leaves him a note.
He leaves him a note, doesn't he? Yeah. And
in the note,
he's like, get out of the house, go somewhere else, do something like that.
I can't remember the instructions he gives him in the note, but at the end of the note, he kind of scalds him for being so careless.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, but so yes. So Callahan's over there for a while, and he keeps looking back and looking at Eddie, and Eddie's just chilling there. And then he looks back one more time, and Eddie's gone. And Callahan realizes that something's wrong. And so he comes back through, and Eddie's not in the cave. And there's a book like holding the box with the Black 13 open. And Callahan leaves the cave, and Eddie's standing on the edge of it, because this cave for everybody is apparently way up in the sky.
Yeah.
And he's getting ready to jump off, essentially. It's kind of like, to me, it's kind of like what the thinny from Wizard Glass was. It's calling him, and it's telling him to do things. Yeah. And Callahan realizes that and shuts the box and grabs Eddie, and he's saved before he can take this plunge off the side of a mountain. And that's the first time you've seen Black 13 really do something pinpointing somebody,
like manipulating.
And it kind of makes you wonder why Eddie, and why at this particular time too. And to be honest, I don't have a good reason. Like, maybe Black 13 realizes what Eddie's trying to do, or not necessarily just Eddie, but the quartet is trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Black 13 at first was, they're not going to be successful or whatever. And then the more things going on, because I'm assuming Black 13, I mean, you kind of almost have to think of it as like a living organism, at least for me. Yeah. And it understands that they're getting further than they're supposed to be. And I think that's when Black 13 finally decides, hey, I got to do something to try and put a stop to this. But of course, Ka is on their side and not on Black 13's side, so he's saved. But that's the only thing I can think of why at that particular moment, at this particular time, that would happen. Because, it's seen them toe dash and it's done other things and they can feel its presence, but they've never actually felt it talking to them.
And for the most part, they've used it for their advantage, or all the toe dash.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff, Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of thought of it as just like a corrupting power when you're exposed to it too long. Because Roland's arthritis, got really bad. His joints
gets really bad.
Got real sandy, I think it's described as.
Yes.
So,
and he's getting worse too. So.
Yeah.
But that's essentially where they're at there. They've got to get back to New York once again at some point.
Yeah. So for those characters and for the lot, that's where that story ends, right? There's not really.
Yeah, there's not
till the next book.
They've got to defeat the wolves, hopefully defeat the wolves, and then going back to New York thing, because they're right up on top of the time when the wolves are supposed to be there. And then let's see, was there anything else in that? One of the cool things, and it kind of ties into what happens later, is with that book, Roland asks, "What's a novel?" And he's there. Well, it's just a made up story, and Roland has seen the book.
Yeah,
and he knows what's in the book, and he knows that it says a novel, and so he asks that question, and they say, "Well, it's just a made up story." So in his mind now is, okay, this is supposed to be made up.
Yeah. But
how is this made up?
But the names and places and certain things that I can pick out are from Callahan's life.
Right.
So how can this be? Yeah. That's why I thought for sure he had the gunslinger.
Right. That's a good, I like that. I never thought about that. That's good.
But so think about this cave. There is at this point, well, by the end, it's even worse. So picking up at the next book, this cave has a bookcase in it, an open box. Well, not anymore, actually. If you go to the end of this book, a door, this wailing cavern where they're like your deepest fears, speak at you, and then by the end of this book, an electric scooter car thing.
It's collecting all kinds of random things.
It's like the strangest cave in the side of a mountain that's ever existed in a fantasy world.
Right. And you find out that there was a tape recorder. I think we talked about it last time, but there's a tape recorder. Who knows, it may be in that cave too. No telling. So that's where it left off. And then kind of jumping into the next plot point is with Jake and the farm and the Slightmans, and I don't think we really need to talk about
back at the ranch with the
about Beanie Slightman, because we've talked about how they've become good friends, so that's not it's involved in it, but the big thing is they go camping out. Mm-hmm. Jake wakes up. He sees somebody off in the distance, two people. He sees two somebodies, and they're talking by the river. And he realizes that one of them's Andy, because Andy's 7 foot tall, and there's no one else that's 7 foot tall, so it's got to be Andy. And then he's not sure about the other one. Then he sees like a twinkling, and he realizes it's the light catching Slightman's glasses.
Yeah.
And so that whole thing brings up, this is weird. And then he continues to watch, and he sees Slightman, he sees Andy leave and Slightman cross the river, and head toward Thunderclap. And so that obviously alarm bells. And so that's Jake is kind of, he doesn't want to tell Roland or anybody else because he's afraid of what Roland will do. And he's also afraid of the consequences that will befall on Benny if it comes out that there's something up with his dad. So he decides to keep it to himself. And then he decides he's going to go try to see what he was where he was going, which is another Oi thing. We haven't talked about Oi a lot recently, but it's really neat. He says, hey, I'm going to go to bed. When the moon comes out at whatever, you wake me up. And he does. And like, one of the things with Oi, again, we haven't really talked about Oi a whole lot, but more and more and more through this thing, you realize how self-aware Oi really is.
Yeah,
the whole thing with him and Benny and the way he takes up with Benny is I'm not saying Benny's not a nice person or maybe whatever, but that was purposeful on Oi's part to befriend Benny like that. Yeah. That wasn't like he just was, oh, here's this new kid. I like him. No, that was specific. Like, and then there's other little things here and there with.
I'm waiting till I get to the end of the series to make a judgment call on Oi, but I don't know how I feel about Oi. I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be some revelation or something that's going to change my mind. But right now, I kind of feel like this. All right. Don't blast me if you're a huge Oi fan, but to me, I could give or take. Oi is inconsequential to the story to me, essentially. I don't know.
Up until this point, I think he has been. I think up until this point, he's been more of a companion and almost like basically a pet. I mean, he's been a pet for Jake.
Yeah.
And other than the fact that he sniffs Jake out in Lud.
Yep, he bites.
That's really the only thing,
dude.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think more with this book, you start, like I said, you start seeing more things that seemed thought out that Oi is doing.
Like one of the things I think about if they were to try to relate this show into a TV show, an adaptation, is how do they handle Oi without it being silly? Like the whole show is this, or the whole book is like this like grim, dark fantasy that is grounded. I know it's a fantasy, but it's grounded somewhat in reality. Like, and then Oi is just kind of like this, like to me, Oi is kind of off from the theme of the rest of the book. And I don't mind it, but I kind of read it inconsequentially. Like Oi is just an additional. Like whenever he bows and stuff to the people of the Calla in that one scene, okay, that's kind of silly, but whatever. I'll just keep reading.
Well, again, I think that's one of the things that shows that there's definitely more to what Oi is. And even going back to his first showing up, like all Bumblers had basically regressed back to like just basic animal. And here's this one Bumbler that still talks and has been shunned by his group and has been, put out, and they just happen to come across that Bumbler. So anyway,
see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. I'll read more.
So takes a horse and he goes over there and he follows this path. He finds like these moving cactuses that try and kill him or whatever. And then he finds this random building out in the woods and in the edge of Thunderclap. And of course, when he goes there, it's like it says he goes first. I think the password was, I can't remember if it was 19 or if it was 99 on that one.
Yeah, 99.
And then of course he goes in and says there's a thing that says like "Welcome to the Dogan," which goes back to the book that Benny Slightman wrote. And then he's kind of checking things out, and there's computers and different things. And then he realizes that Benny, the elder, and Andy are showing up. And so he has to hide. And he's able to hide, but at the same time, because it's a completely empty place and there's a microphone and speakers and things like that, he's able to hear what they discuss. And essentially, it's him giving a report to some guy at Algol Ciento named Finley Otego. And he gives, like, they basically talk about, like, what they think is going to happen and, like, what's going on with the quartet and the plans and yada, yada. And kind of Andy does his thing in the same way. But you find out that essentially Benny Sr. has these glasses. The reason they figure out kind of all independently that he's the bad guy is because he's got glasses. No one else has glasses. And essentially these people, whoever Finley Otego or whoever, is giving him gifts to kind of win over his part in going against the Calla. And they also they make a good point. Benny is an only child, but he's part of a twin that had been killed earlier. And I can't remember who says it, but one of them, once they all start talking about it, there was probably over the years they kill one twin and leave a single and go to that parent and say, hey, there's a good chance the wolves are going to take that one child, but if you help us, we'll make sure that your child is left alone. And they kind of figure that's how it's been done throughout the years. And so you find out a lot of things, a lot of new things, like whatever the Algol Ciento is and whoever this guy is. Andy changes a lot. Like he becomes like he's I don't take things from you, kind of stuff like that. And
well, I like how Jake figures out that the eye flashing is he's laughing.
He's laughing at people,
which changes everything, because then it's like all the times in his past conversations, it's like he's asking what seems like silly questions, but really internally he's just laughing at how silly these humans are. Right. It's kind of like whenever I say wild stuff to my son, and it's like because I know that like 50% of him will believe it and 50% of him will know that I'm lying. And it's right. But to me, it's funny that we're just having this conversation about, oh yeah, sometimes elephants do fly. I don't know. That's a really bad one, but anything like that. He's like he's poking at these humans, there's a Voyager episode where they come across this ship that the entire crew has mysteriously died, and the only person in the crew left is this hologram, and he's like a holographic engineer or something. And it turns out that the hologram had sort of flipped its wig and became like it hated the humans, and it ends up like that it killed all the humans on the ship. And he's trying to convince the holographic doctor on Voyager to join him and his and he tells them, I don't know who the actor is, but the actor does a really good job of portraying, he's like these disgusting humans, how they chew up their food and then swallow it and it digests in their gut. Like he just talks about how gross they are at being humans. Like Andy kind of like, maybe not that extreme, but that's the kind of like, he's just, he laughs at these people. Right. He's really laughing the whole time and they don't know it.
Andy even says, I'll take this stuff from these other people, but I'm not taking this from you.
Yeah.
Because you're in on the secret.
Yeah.
So you don't get to treat me like this. You're basically calling him out on everything. And so now Jake knows 100% that Benny Sr. is not a good person. And so then that kind of brings everything to a beginning of a conclusion.
Let me do a temperature check. Before we do the confrontation and the conclusion, do you want to make that another episode? Because we've already almost gone 2 hours on this.
We could.
I don't want to rush it. You know what I mean? What do you think? What's your judgment call? Because I'm free tomorrow night if you want to do it tomorrow night.
I can probably do it any other day. Yeah. I mean, we definitely could, because this is going to take.
I just don't want to be like, we spent all that time talking about all the other sections, and then the conclusion and the confrontation, we're just, and the wolves came to the fun of it. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I definitely think we could do that. And then we could, if we leave this for the next thing and it doesn't take that long, we could always bring up some other discussions.
So I didn't want to split this up into 2 episodes, but I feel like we're going to have to do another part for the last part of the book because I don't want to rush through it. And so, I'll go ahead and wrap this up here. And then the next episode will be our final wrap up of the story, and then our thoughts and predictions on what to expect after this one. So thanks for listening, and peace. Also, I got to pee really bad.